of this case, and I think it's fair to say the government understood that this case would change the way, we would look at cross-border peoples.
We knew we were those people, but we never recorded that we were those people.
Somebody had to throw out an anchor and get this started, and I elected myself.
I have spent decades educating the public about the Sinixt.
They were not able to establish that they were a proper representative body of Sinixt people. Why?
We got those first 6 remains back in 1990.
Because they didn't have criteria for who is Sinixt and who is not.
Since then, we have repatriated and reburied 64 ancestral remains on this site.
And they could not demonstrate that they had the consent of the Sinixt community.
Look at their sponsors, BC Hydro. Damming is one of the reasons we're declared extinct.
I know there has been, a lot of dialogue in this community around Marilyn James's baskets, which are not Sinixt baskets.
It's the same exact basket.
Do we have a story to tell? Multi-layered. On the surface, it's a story about triumph. A nation asserting and reclaiming rights. A story about a people judged dead and gone for decades who quite clearly aren't.
Was my feather straight that time?
Perfect. Perfect, man.
You know what we're saying, right?
No, I don't.
We are still here.
Scratch the surface, however. There's bad blood.
A carpet of blue a week ago. Just a carpet of blue. It was just
controversy.
We'll go on up to the site.
It's a story about extinction and baskets.
Like a contemporary version of a pit house. And I agreed to become the site operator.
Marilyn James proudly proclaims her Sinixt heritage.
Time that we have occupied this site.
Her homeland, located in the shadow of the Rockies in southeastern BC. Her people, divided by the Canadian-U.S. border.
This heritage site is carbon dated at something like 3,500 years, give or take, a few hundred years.
Declared extinct by the Canadian government.
I'm just carrying on with my responsibilities and my duties here.
Thank you. See.
This site has been an occupation site of the Sinixt for over 3 decades. I have spent decades educating the public about the Sinixt.
People said to me, you're going to go up there and you're going to risk this and you're going to risk that, and possibly you're going to get thrown in jail. And I told them, yes, that's a possibility, and I could use a vacation.
Rick Desautels is a Sinixt from Coville tribes south of the border. In 2010, Desautels crossed into Canada and shot an elk. He was charged, setting off a decade-long legal battle all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. Rick and Marilyn, both Sinixt, both stood up for their rights. Natural allies, you'd expect, but When we visited this past summer, there was tension.
He didn't even talk to me. He came directly, took his people that he brought into the pit house, and then they walked down that way. He didn't bother to talk to us, or, it's just like that.
So, what was that about? At present, the Sinixt are split in two by country borders and political factions. In Canada, James operates under the mantle of the autonomous Sinixt, formerly the Sinixt Nation Society. Desautels lives in the U.S., part of the Federated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, shortened to Colville Tribes. For clarity, we will use the terms Northern Sinixt and Southern Sinixt. Out of respect, we will not use Canadian or American Sinixt. Sinixt's traditional territory extended into Washington state. Settler and later industrial encroachment squeezed the Sinixt. Most fled for their own safety to other reserves, some across the border to Colville.
My understanding is 80% of the Sinixt from this territory went down to what's now the United States. There's still 20% of your population living in Canada, or do you know?
Oh, I'm sure. We knew we were those people, but we never recorded that we were those people.
The Columbia River, one of the most erratic in the world, is being harnessed. 30 miles north of the American border, Canadian engineers are constructing the massive Arrow Dam.
The final nail in the coffin was when their land was flooded. Construction of the massive Columbia River Hydro Project began in the early 20th century. Decades later, when finished, 60 dams dotted the watershed. The Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation is an amalgamation of people displaced from 11 other tribes. Roger Finley is on Colville's council. He says the Desautels case was as much about identity as it was hunting rights.
Next step forward, that's one of the huge things is finding all of our people. Say, hey, you have a place to come back to now. If you want to be Sinixt, your family's Sinixt, and we'll figure that enrollment out moving forward.
There are up to 3,500 Sinixt in Colville. In Canada, that number is not so clear. The last registered member died in 1953, and with a stroke of a pen, Canada declared the Sinixt extinct. In 2021, the Sinixt from the South were victorious, proving they had Section 35 rights in Canada. This past summer, Sinixt from Colville crossed the border. For the Sinixt, time to celebrate, sing and dance. In one of her last assignments with us, former APTN journalist Melissa Ridgen jumped in a truck with me to check out the gathering. But first, the night before.
I talked about the implications of this case, and I think it's fair to say the government understood that this case would change the way, we would look at cross-border peoples.
At Town Hall, a blow-by-blow accounting of how they won.
I think the government saw it as a very important case and took it all the way up. But thankfully, they went 0 for 4.
Canada lost to a nation it still considers extinct. To win, the Sinixt used settler records to prove its case. Mark Underhill is Sinixt's lawyer.
And what that evidence was about was the connection between the Sinixt people and this territory. That evidence of that enduring connection, Shelley gave wonderful evidence about, being from the rocks and the water and being from that place, and that's what it meant to be Sinixt. And that's the evidence that won the case.
Who kept records, right? So we didn't keep, we have oral records, and after generations, you lose some of those because they weren't carried out or carried on. So those records weren't kept by the missionaries and things like that. That was huge in our case. to get where we are now. Moving forward, we'll educate our youth down there too that this is who you are as a people. You're Sinixt Nation, and this is where you can go. This is how you can gather. This is what we're working towards to get back in those areas. You were forced here. You were brought here because of
Here being Colville.
yes,
Yeah.
of non-Indigenous people that where you lived before found something of value. And then they put you over here because what you have here doesn't have any value.
And for Roger Finley, dreams of something more, a land base for a migration back home.
Do you see grandchildren, great-grandchildren of yours living here?
Yes, yes, I do. I almost thought about moving here when I was younger. I worked in hydroelectric power, and they have dams up here. And you know, once I started coming up here and realizing, you know, I could live here. Most First Nations just claim the whole province or all of Canada or anything like that. So next step moving forward, we will figure all that out. This is the starting line.
The final answer and processing what I did is in the back of the room there. If I could have my daughter and my grandchildren stand up. Those are the reasons why I went up and I did what I did. For the fact that somebody had to throw out an anchor and get this started. And I elected myself. Thank you.
They're trying to run me out of here now.
Why?
The ministry.
In a statement to the province regarding James's position, Andy Joseph Jr., chairman of the Sinixt Confederacy, wrote, "At no time have the Sinixt appointed her as a matriarch or any kind of representative for our people."
Because of those complaints, they have terminated my MOU, and I informed Roger Tinney that he could come and arrest me if he wanted to. I'm not going.
The release calls out James's claim to ownership of traditional Sinixt baskets as false, stating it's a form of cultural appropriation. Baskets were a talking point at the town hall.
This raises a really important point that we can talk about, and it's going to lead into the real star of the show, this basket that's sitting between Andrea and I. I know there has been, a lot of dialogue in this community around Marilyn James's baskets, which are not Sinixt baskets.
What we have not had were any baskets until the last little while, when two baskets have come from two Sinixt families.
Here's the basket, and I can show you a close-up.
It failed to impress James.
It's the same exact basket.
Same style.
Same style.
Like a coil style?
Except ours is bigger.
The baskets in question were donated to a small museum in Roslyn, BC.
So my mom gave me those baskets, and they were our family baskets. The cedar basket was a pair. They were saddlebags.
Okay.
And so one survived. That one's at I think it's supposed to be like at 500 years. And the corn husk basket is something like at a couple hundred years.
They go, "Oh, what?" I said, "How do you eat this?" They, of course, told me.
A decade earlier, Marilyn James attempted to convince a British Columbia court that she was not extinct. We'll have more on that when we return.
So this site is not only a repatriation and reburial site, it is a burial site of the occupants that occupied this site for thousands of years.
Marilyn James has called this land home for decades now. This is Vallican, located about 40 kilometers outside Nelson, BC. 2 years ago, the province recognized James as a caretaker here. In 1987, construction on this road was halted when a very old Sinixt community was unearthed. Sinixt artifacts, skeletal remains, and pit house depressions were discovered.
The remains were hauled off to the Royal British Columbia Museum in Victoria. So when I came and became engaged, we got those first 6 remains back in 1990. And since then, we have repatriated and reburied 64 ancestral remains on this site.
Pat Finley remembers those days.
And you were part of the initial occupation here at Vallican 30 some odd years ago?
33 years ago, yeah. My wife and I, we came up just to check it out. After a meeting we had in Inchalem, we had a meeting there that they were trying to make a road through our ancestral grounds, and they were destroying pit houses and stuff. So we came up to take a look, and that's when the equipment moved in. So we just went back, got close, came right back with a few people, and that's when we stayed up here for quite a while after that.
Today, with his mother and grandson, here to reconnect with his ancestors.
Who's this?
At first, like Rick Desautel's visit earlier in the day, things were tense.
See, now that's highly disrespectful. If I went to someone's place, I would go say, hey, I'm Marilyn James, I'm Sinixt, I'd really like to come to this place. Right.
But eventually the ice was broken, and like she has for decades now, James offers a tour.
Yeah, I was just going to take these guys for a walk to see our burial ground, you know. Yeah. All along here there's burial. If you're done in, don't try it. There are traditional burials, and we have a unique burial practice that's not practiced anywhere else, which is in a sitting upright position, facing east, you know, buried in a basket, sometimes covered with red ochre.
All this has done nothing to endear James to Colville leadership.
You were saying that there was allegations that were made by the Sinixt who had been here yesterday having a celebration of this homecoming, saying that you are not Sinixt. What are they saying you are?
I'm Chinese, and I am part Chinese. And they're saying I'm Okanagan. But if they're developing a confederacy where the Okanagans are all part of it, and the Secwepemc are part of it, and the Tana are part of it, how is it that I don't belong? But all those rock cairns, every one of them represents a reburial.
Bad blood between the northern Sinixt and their cousins to the south goes back years. In 2010, an attempt to halt logging by a blockade wound up in court. James and the group, the Sinixt Nation Society, later the Autonomous Sinixt, wanted the timber license quashed.
Many of you will know they were not successful in that case because they were not able to establish that they were a proper representative body of Sinixt people. Why? Because they didn't have criteria for who is Sinixt and who is not, and they could not demonstrate that they had the consent of the Sinixt community to represent the Sinixt.
The judge noted a cloud hung over the claim. The southern Sinixt had intervened, name-checking James. She was not a chief nor a spokesperson. The absurdity of asking for membership criteria from a people who were legally extinct was immaterial. The damage was done. Logging went ahead.
He wants to do 5. Oh. No, you wanted to do 4.
Okay, we'll do 4.
Four it is. I never did.
4 it is.
Despite the Supreme Court victory, the Sinixt Confederacy has work to do, defining who they actually are.
Who is going to decide who is or who isn't your people?
That will all come by the lineage, right? And so those things like that, I don't even worry about.
The Desautel case does not draw any lines between Canadian Sinixt and American Sinixt. What it held is that the Sinixt are an Aboriginal peoples of Canada. And I know there's a lot of information flowing around this community in particular, drawing lines that, in my respectful view, should not be drawn, and I think are diminishing the import and the impact of the Disotell decision.
Multi-bodies we put down, remains in one. If we got them back in a group, we left them together and put them in one hole.
People who are living south of the Canada-U.S. border want to come and access these ancestral lands. Do you have a problem with that? Like, are you worried that that would be one more corporation, Indigenous corporation, that would...
Oh, no doubt. If it were to go a certain way.
James is concerned the Confederacy has more than hunting in mind.
Colvilles have already signed an MOU with ONA. So they're developing a confederacy, and their corporate structure is Colville Confederated Business Council. So it is the council's mandate to conduct business. Look at their sponsors for their event yesterday.
BC Hydro, Fortis BC, Nelson District Credit Union.
BC Hydro? Damming is one of the reasons we're declared extinct.
The ONA is the Okanagan Nation Alliance, a group of First Nations from BC's interior, Sinixt neighbors. Its leadership was at the celebration.
This gathering, as you see all the people here, the other, provincial leaders and Indigenous leaders, this is a networking.
I appreciate everyone who has come. Limlim.
And I'm just going to ask, I want the leader.
I was responsible for bringing those first 6 back, and the rest of them that are up there, I have responsibility. I can't just bring them here, rebury them. Why do you think we had to go get them in the first place? Because the ministry dug them up and hauled them off. You think I'm going to trust the ministry to them again? Hell no. I think it's pretty sad to see what it's come to. I really blame the colonial governments for creating this. There are Indian people out there just making shit up because they don't know.
Finley says the win is just the beginning. For him, next steps are obvious.
You're still considered extinct here.
Yes, so that's one of the first steps going forward, educating the people that this is what happened in the court case and getting everything through to the powers that be, that we need to put on that federal registry that we are a Canadian tribe.
We have to re-inform people, oh no, we're still extinct. Oh no, there's still this work to be done. Oh no, it's all done now. It's not done.